We're here, season 2, Weed for the People podcast, episode 6. Got a special treat for you here. We got Addison, IG handle, aka Turpova. Follow it, especially if you like the hash, man. Anyway, thanks for stopping by just right over the bridge. Figured we could have a little conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cool, right on, man. Let's just kick it off. I know you're working on some new stuff and didn't want to waste all the good stuff off camera. So, tell us what you're working on, the event stuff, and just, give anybody who's watching a little bit of background on that.
Yeah. We've got, I've done events in the past, the Legends of Hash events, which are, it's an event that was in Amsterdam 20 years, and it started in Amsterdam about 20 years ago with the High Times events of hash makers that would be there, which would be with BC Bubbleman Marcus. And he started that event, and him and Sam the Skunk Man and a bunch of like legendary, guys that were kind of from that scene at the time. And they would put on their own dinner that would then be turned into like a hash competition. I got invited to it a couple times. I went, DNA Genetics, Aaron and those guys invited me once. And then I had gotten invited again through Marcus. So I kind of knew what the event was. It was fun. It was kind of exclusive. People had a lot of respect for it too, which was kind of dope. And then we started a management production company, and I think 2018 or 19, and that's when I talked to Marcus about possibly producing the event, and we did the first one in LA, and just kind of came up with, at that point, then your brain starts working towards like, oh shit, like how do I put on an event? Because you've like judged so many High Times events, judged all these other events, so then you kind of start working in that direction, thinking about stuff. So I got like challenged in that, and we did those events for 3 years for Legends. And then just kind of pivoted from that because it's the event space is interesting because there's different types of events, and there's really different consumer, that you're attracting. There's the guy who just wants to go to the sesh and he's looking for booths of like companies that he might not have heard of before that have hash and he wants to buy it. And, that's how that works. Or there's guys and they're going to there's food trucks there and, they kind of like have a budget and where they're going to spend their money, what they're going to do. And then you have guys that want like the dinner experience or something. They want like a higher end, and now you're attracting like the hash maker themselves and guys that have more money to do stuff. And then there's people that like a multi-day event. So there's really different customers. So we kind of thought about that more. And then even in the name of the new event, we call it Hashmore. It's got like, it's really just about like the perfect hash event and like how do you put it on. So it has to be 3 days because you've got judging. And if you have the right amount, we think 35 makers is like a good mix of hash makers to have.
How does one, if you got 35, how do you whittle it down to 35?
So we've done Legends for 3 years, and that was an invite only. So we were kind of like picking the best makers, going through and kind of working. And then we started bringing in like newer makers, vetting them, finding newer guys, because we had a list of makers that were like winners, that were the legendary kind of dudes. We'd go to them and be like, what do you think of these guys? And they're, oh, these guys are these guys. So we kind of built a really great list of good makers. So what I did for this one was just reached out to, all the makers that we'd worked with and said, hey, the first 35 of you guys that pay for your tickets, get all your stuff taken care of, you're in the competition, we'll move forward. So we've learned how to move forward more quickly, how to wrangle cats, how to kind of put these things on and what you need to have in terms of like your assets that you're going to be distributing to these people and make the point of contact very quick and low touch. And so it's a lot of work, but we've kind of figured out how to do it. And
I know events are hard. We outsource it, and I still feel like I shouldn't say we outsource it, but we have a guy who does it, and it's just still a lot. So like, how do you determine, well, let me ask a more general question. I'm always interested on how they judge these things.
Yeah.
And, I think generally anybody who knows is a little sus.
That's a good question, yeah.
Right? A little sus on how the judging goes.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it is in this case. Just, I'm always curious.
Oh, no.
So like, how does it get judged? And then from there, I guess the next question is like, what makes the best hash? But like, how do you ensure the process is like, not going to the homie or the duffel bag guy or whatever?
We figured out the best way to do it is we kind of steal it from the Legends of Hash model, and that's where the judges are the actual makers that enter the competition. And if you do that, then now your judging pool is essentially the guys that aren't gonna they're not going to all get together and let so-and-so win. So they're not going to fix it.
Right.
You know, so, but, and that creates other things that you have to do to make sure that they're being honest, because everyone cheats, you know, in some way. So that's one thing.
By the way, you're the first guy with a competition that I've heard that just says, yeah, there's a little cheating. It's part of the game. It's like an election.
And what I mean by cheats is this is what I mean by cheats.
No, I get it. Yeah.
You'll see where makers will come to your competition and they're buddies. They know each other. They're like, what's up, buddy? They might like buy from the same farm. They might have sort of it'd be in the same ecosystem essentially. And they sit down at the same table. They start judging. So they got some power. They don't like that guy over there. And you'll notice on their judging, they both gave that dude all zeros, but they gave each other 10s. So there's shit that you'll see in the judging if you pay attention that you can adjust in the overall numbers in the end and make it so that it is a fair competition.
You throw out the low and the high, or just
you throw out the low and the high.
No like actual rule of thumb.
So in our game, what we figured out was in the hash game, the best judge for hash is actually a glass blower, because they're very detailed. And they take it really seriously because they're not hash judges, they're glass blowers. So if you take and then you get a double whammy, because then you can go to some of the top glass blowers in the world and they love hash, and you can make them a judge for your competition, which is like a really smart idea at that point. So because then you're kind of crashing the two worlds together. It's all one world anyway, but you can kind of bring more people to your event, kind of make more attention to it. So if you add some glass makers to the judging, the right number of them, 5 to 7 of them, then now you have like you're like North Star is those dudes judging, because you'll judge yourself, and I've done it, and you'll be really in line with like what they're saying, you know. So you know those dudes are being honest, and they tasted everything, they tried it all. They're like, oh, that was like fucking burnt rubber, that was like this, you know. You're picking up and really having a great like understanding of them seeing the same thing. And then the hash makers, they're different in the sense where they're like making hash, and they've got politics, and they've got, you know, we might use the same sticker guy, and we might do this and that. So all that stuff kind of has something to do with how they do the judging. So we'll drop the top, drop the bottom, use those the judging from the 5 to 7 hash makers, and then that kind of like makes it so it's solid numbers.
So when you're judging some hash, what would you say? Like, I'll just open it up, not even say top 5. Like, what are you looking for? What differentiates, like, best? And again, I just don't have a palette like that, but like, how do you determine what the best?
It's like, what's good hash, you know? So
well, that's what I'm asking. What's good hash?
So good hash is, it visually looks good. It, aromatically looks, it looks good or smells good. It, it has a great flavor and taste. Those are two things that you're going to. So our judging, we try to simplify our judging. We've done a lot of judging. So we've done it ourselves so many times in so many competitions. So we're like, does it look, how does it look? So that's going to be a judge point. How does it smell? How does it taste? And then there's the after banger, which is essentially how does the hash look in the banger after you just took your dab? And if you took your dab at the right temperature, and you know what the hell you're doing, because most guys are like super nerd about it. Like, they have a specific rig, they have a very specific banger, they hit it at a very specific temperature, they have a temperature gauge that tells them what temperature it is at that time. There might be some little pearls inside to keep the temperature higher, because they're going to add something. They know the size of the dab's going to affect all of that. And, so there's guys that are very, they understand a lot about it. So that guy can look at the banger, and if he did it correctly, if it was good hash, it's going to look a certain way. It's going to have it's going to be clean. It's going to be still nice and yellow. It's going to have all these beautiful things about it that are alluring and still nice. And you're like, oh, they're good. Instead of, oh, my banger's all fucked up. It looks like there's a lot of particulate. There's a lot of shit in there. You could tell, like the banger will tell you everything that the hash maker doesn't. It's like you'll find it all out when you look inside the banger.
So you think when you look in the banger, if whatever the aftermath is looking rough, that's a strong, assuming the guy didn't chart or anything, that's a strong statement on what's in there.
Yeah, especially melt. If the melt has like a lot of stalks, a lot of other stuff in it, and you're cleaning it up when you're finishing when you're smoking melt. And you look inside of that, because typically with melt nowadays, you'll smoke it in like a big 30 mil banger. You'll use a bubble cap because you're trying to create like convection, like a hot area that's going to make all those heads melt and open up. get all those active compounds out. Where like you see guys using slurpers, that's for smoking like rosin, which is going to pull a lot of air through it and give you a lot of flavor and taste, and you're going to use more of it. You know, there's different ways of using these bangers and stuff to smoke different types of hash to get like the best. That's what it's made for. I mean, there's some serial killers that smoke melt in a slurper, but
why serial killers?
No, it's just a funny way of saying that someone is just like crazy as fuck.
I get it. Yeah. No, I mean, look, I think the hash market's growing. Look, we launched one. I'll do a shameless plug here. You know, we're selling it $30, 25 and change on Sunday. Top of the line. That's how it should be. That's what we're trying to do, right? And I just, you know, as that market grows, you know, there's a few really good quality companies, but also seems there's like a lot that are just, you know, there used to be like a couple tiers. Now there's like 4. Actually, you know what? Let me ask you that question. As we were looking at the pricing and stuff and trying to figure out like, hey, let's try to, you know, pull people in from the black market, you know, have a product that's good that we could still make our margin on, but basically is cheaper than everything else instead of trying to max it out because we don't have a middleman. So we're going through everything. And I remember there being like, you know, it's not something I studied really closely, you know, until we started launching. There was like tier 1, tier 2. Now they got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. What do you think of all that shit? Or is there only one tier and the rest of that is bullshit? Like, what's your take on that?
I mean, what is it? So when you ask yourself what it is and you understand what it is, you get into how hash is made. And for
tell us about that, because I think it's, you know, pretty. And honestly, I'm just gaming myself up on a lot of this.
So for solventless hash, you're taking fresh frozen material, you're putting it into a system where you're then separating the active compounds from the material itself, you know, from the actual plant material. You're using ice and water and you're getting it all cold, and then you're straining it out into typically these certain micron bags, which will capture and separate the different microns in the bags. A smaller micron will fall through and the larger micron. So you go from larger to smaller, and then obviously you collect it all. So you'd pour the water, the wastewater from that system that we just talked about through the bags, collect all that stuff, and then that would be your raw material. That's like your melt or your raw water hash. You'd take that, you'd post-process it from there. You could air dry it. You could then use a dehydrator. You could do whatever you want, and then you'd then have melt. You could grade that melt depending on the quality. And all the quality and all this is going to depend on the genetics. So the genetics, I always tell people in cannabis, like, I listen to people, like we were just listening to your bud, you know, there's so many people that have different jobs in this business. And the one thing that no one ever talks about or realizes that, like, it's all about genetics. It's all, you know, look at how much money was made from gelato, you know, from one fucking strain.
Well, in fact, me and Doja talked about this when he was on. I was able to get the gelato, not in the very first iteration, but early on. This is maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing 2014 or so, 2013. And maybe a little late 14. I'm trying to remember when it popped, but like just that alone, I mean, whatever. We grew the same, and you know, we went from $2,000 to $3,000 a pack from having the, you know, the gelato. And the gelato's really stood the test of time and been crossbred into a lot of different strains. It's interesting that of any strain, I would say in the last 10 years, there's a couple others, but it really that genetic is stayed strong and really it's
like that OG. The perps. It's always one SKU, but where did that one SKU come from? So what's cool about that is, like, when it comes to like hope, it's like there's no more hope in any other business than this business, because everyone's always like, this could be that next
the next big strain.
And that's what's sick, because it could. You never know. Like, it could be that next banger, and it doesn't take. And we've seen it a million times. It doesn't take like a certain dude. It's like any dude. Any fucking dude.
So you think there's just a lot of, I mean, obviously you got to hype it and get the marketing behind it, or maybe in the end the genetics so good it takes care
Well, you could fumble the bag too. You could have the illest genetics ever.
And nobody ever,
And then some other dude gets it that knows what he's doing, and pow, now he's got the golden lance. You know, it's like, but my point is that it's one SKU. It's one thing. It's one single thing, and it's always a SKU. So, you know, that's how we figured out Pyramid Pipeline, which is our supply chain thing, was like, I was sitting there and was like, what's funny is that, like, every one of these bits of hype and everything is always one thing. It's one genetic that then gets repopulated and turned into it.
So. You know, so I've opened up a lot more, you know, hash or stuff that's being claimed as hash. And again, I'm far from the expert, but you could see the difference between, you know, I guess what they're calling, you know, tier 4, tier 1, whatever, tier 2. What do you think the other stuff really is? Like what's the process? So like, if you look at real hash, you could, it doesn't look like waxy melted trash. It has that, real, good whatever texture to it, and it kind of holds itself together. The other stuff looks like it, looks like candle wax or whatever as you go down the list. So like I can look at it and, kind of size it up as a layman, but what is that, like, whatever you want to say, worst tier, lowest tier, like what's really going on there? And it's not really hash, or like what part of the process is that, and why is that such a shitty looking product? And I think for a lot of the consumers, they're learning, and I think hash is actually starting to hit a little bit. Rosin, everything is starting to hit. The consumers are getting a little more educated. Like, it will always be a little nichey, but I think the niche is getting big. But what the fuck is that? Like, why does it look like that? What different level of lack of care allowed them to get the price point down, but make it look, even for somebody who's far from an expert, like, well, that looks like trash.
So like, to answer the question, I guess you have to go back to like, if you took 10 strains, if I just let somebody pick 10 strains of cannabis and they delivered them all to me in fresh frozen, and I ran them all through the same system and made hash out of them, solventless hash, each one of those 10 would have a completely different yield. There'd be different microns of hash in each one of those different strains that would be more abundant than others, which there'd be like maybe some way more of the 70U in some of them and way more of the lower microns. The higher grade is the higher number typically, and it's normally between like the 70U up to the 90U to the 120U. And that's like, and what that means is that that micron, when you expose it to flame, it's going to turn to liquid. It'll melt down to liquid, but only within those three, that are there. The other ones will kind of do it, but once they can't really fully pull the test. So the way that these guys, Bubble Man, Marcus, and those guys developed a way to kind of figure out if it was quality or not was you take each one of those, take them each separately, because they're all going to be separate in the bags, dry them separately, and then inspect them and see which of that strain's microns are actually going to be good together. And if the 90, 120, and 70U are going to all be good together and they're going to make really good hash, you'd put those together. You take the 45 and the other stuff, you'd be like, all right, we're going to take all this and make it into, edible grade concentrates. Maybe we'll make pens out of this. Maybe we'll make this out of this. And then the more you work with strains, you start to figure out like, all right, well, the GMO is like close to 8% yield, but a lot of it's 45U. And when we don't put the 45U in it, it doesn't press as dark. It presses a lot lighter. So like, you start figuring this shit out, because these are the components that make up, these are the mechanical components that make up what you're creating. And then it's all separated based on microns. So then you're like, leave this one out, leave that one out. Oh, fuck, look, it's lighter. So they figure this shit out when they're processing it, because what they do is they take then that water hash that's dried, they put it into bags, they put it into a press, they press it. It then, takes all the waxes, fats, and lipids, traps it inside. Out from that, they keep all that inside, but then out comes this beautiful gold oil. That stuff comes out. That's fresh press. They take that, they cold cure it, they whip it, they make cold cure. So they cold cure the process into it. So they take it and let it sit, in a cold place for a while, and then whip it, and then that's what makes cold cure. And that's a finished product. But what's crazy about the whole process is if I just stopped at the water hash part and I had dried water hash, I could put that in glass and store that in a freezer for like 12 years. And that shit could take it out the next day and run it, and it would make just as good a product as 12. So you could stop the process of degradation in cannabis in this game. And that's why like smart hash makers do really well, because they can take their product, they can take in a bunch of fresh frozen. So the game, like money and business and the cannabis game. So you got a bunch of money, and what you do is you buy a bunch of fresh frozen that is going to yield well. You pull that in, produce it, and then take the good shit, and then you kind of like take that good shit and put it in your freezers and stash it, and then take the rest of it, get away with kind of tricking people into thinking that it's better quality because it smells just as good and looks just as good. But again, the real way to tell is in the banger. Like,
what percent of people, I always trip on this on the indoor too, like what percent of, even at that, let's just say even of judges, do you think all the judges even really have the finer differences down, or like go to the general, put the judges aside. Let's just assume that the judges are all up to par. But like, whatever, just guy off the street smoking hash. Do you think like with education he could get it? Or do you think it's kind of like, a lot of people claim it and don't have it? I mean, what's your experience?
You should select judges that you want their opinion.
Right.
Because they have something that to offer in terms of like their understanding of what you're having them judge.
Right. Right.
So like, I think when it comes to that, that's really the biggest part about it. Like when I do competitions or events, I don't really want the guest's opinion in terms of like the stuff, because I want the guest that's coming to the event to kind of holy shit their way through the event. And what I mean by that is to be like, every time they turn around, like, oh fuck, there's fresh donuts out here, and oh fuck, there's this here, oh fucking look, and oh fucking. I want them to kind of have that experience there, and not to have to think about like chewing on a pencil, fucking, we gotta get these right, because now you're rushing people who aren't really experts on cannabis or experts on hash judging. And those are hash makers, those are glass blowers, those are guys that consume a shitload. Those are guys who have exposure to a lot of hash. And they can do that process. They can do, if you simplify it, my theory is, if I simplify it to 4 things, then you should, if you know your shit, you should be able to give me an honest answer on those 4 things. And it's, how does it smell? How does it look? How does it smell? How does it taste? What's the afterbanger? And those 4 things are how we judge it on. And that's like, and they do it on, on their phone, in Google, in a survey. And it's like, we do all the judging that way. So
perfect. If you're buying hash, go to those 4 things.
That's it.
If you want to know if you got it good or you got some fucking mass-produced candle wax.
Because it could taste great, it could smell great, it could look really good. But then when you look in the banger, you're like, fuck, man, it's producing, or the Q-tip that you're using to clean up the banger, because that's a really great way to do it too. You look at that Q-tip and you're like, the Q-tip's fucking black and there's all this shit on it. And that could mean like, all right, well, let me lower my temp. So instead of hitting it at 560 or, some dudes are like, I hit it 740. I'm like, well, dude, you're fucking Darth Vader.
Right.
Every dab you take.
Well, yeah, no, we get that on the vapes where it's like, bro, I know you. I'll get you another vape.
Bring it down.
Yeah. I'm not gonna tell you. It's never user error. It's always.
I don't want terpenes that are like not vaporizing at like, like I don't know. I want like sesquiterpenes and like little baby terpenes.
So how does I know like even your page and everything, you got all the hash memes and metaphors and all that fun stuff. So how did you get so focused on hash, and like how does like one kind of just like go all in on the hash side of it, right? Like how did that become your, I hear you talk and you're fucking gamed up for days on it, and just the passion and the afterbangers, and getting into the judging. I mean, how do you go down that? I don't want to call it a rabbit hole because that minifies it, but how do you, go down the, hey, I'm going to be a hash guy and fucking that's what I'm all about. Putting this flower down a little bit, respect all that, but I'm a fucking hash man.
Yeah.
How does
I think it has a lot to do with like my last life. So my last life in cannabis, I got to California in '98, and then was like a semi-pro snowboarder, and got on with Rosignol Snowboards, like their semi-pro team through this regional rep that was in Stockton. And I had this girlfriend whose dad happened to like be the director of finance at UOP, which was in Stockton, and we were living in Colorado, and I was like, let's go. It was all kind of lined up. I was like, this is the way to do it. Moved to California, was snowboarding first, and then through the snowboard shops and stuff, met these growers. Like I was working at a snowboard shop. These dudes came in. They had more money than Jesus. They just smelled like weed. And they were like, I just want to buy everything new. And you're like, all right. And, they do this huge sale. And then meeting these guys and selling them snowboards. And they were like, oh, you snowboard? And you're like, yeah. And you go snowboard with them. And then, you're 100 times better than them at snowboarding. So then they're like, they want to be your friend. So then they kind of invite you in. And then I learned that like all these guys grew, and they all had like, worked with guys that owned grow shops. And it was just like a really cool crew of guys. And just because I snowboarded well, I kind of infiltrated their group and became friends with them super fast, and then started growing, and then had multiple grow houses. And then it was like, these contractors are building all these houses. There's all these loan officers. So then before you know it, you've got like 15 houses, 20 houses that you're growing in. And it's really like, it's a guy and his girlfriend. You get the house, then you go to the guy and his girlfriend. Hey, it's a brand new house. You can move into it. You take care of the rooms with me. They take 1 bedroom. It's like a 4-bedroom place. So we were doing that a bunch. And then I like started like a fake landscape company, and I'd like go and like, I'd check the landscape, and then I'd go inside and like look at the rooms. And, so I kind of had some things like that going on that I'd kind of learned at first and really quick, and then got into just selling cannabis to the dispensaries. So these guys kind of showed me that stuff really quickly and got into that business. And I got here in 98. So then it was like, got into medical, got into selling to dispensaries, was living in Stockton, and got into with a good group of guys that were there. So that was like, we had it where we could go to the grow shop and they'd front us equipment and we'd pop off a grow and pay for everything. So it was really like a great system to have, even when you think about it later on in terms of like, I don't even have those kind of setups now in like regular business. So it's kind of nice to have like a good crew. But did that for a long time, and then owned a dispensary in San Joaquin County, and where was it? I think you did it in Oakdale.
Yeah, I know San Joaquin County a little bit.
So I did it in Oakdale, and then it got raided. But they
don't fuck around. You know why? Because they got the wine.
They're gangster sons of bitches. Yeah,
we were talking off camera with Sean. Shout out to Sean, Murphy's Ridge. Calaveras is way more open-minded.
Oh, they'll kick you right in the teeth. Yeah, they're gangsters.
San Joaquin, they don't fuck around. Yeah.
Well, they're down to fight in the dirt, which is cool, and like I'm down with that. So that was kind of like, I saw that as like a challenge, So I was like, fuck you guys, And I had a bunch of money from growing, and was just like, well, fuck, these guys aren't. I was like, you know what, you guys aren't that smart, and I just probably should. It was like, it's tough, I think, if you're like if you've got like that Barracuda kind of feeling. I grew up in the East Coast. I'm the youngest of 7 kids. My parents were like, my dad was a trucker. My mom cleaned houses. It was like, I just grew up like really didn't. I had like my parents like suggested things. They're like, you might want to come home at this time, but it was never like I had no supervision my entire life. So I kind of had like this wild way of being like, well, if it's possible, like if I don't die, it's possible, So it was kind of like, nothing was ever impossible to do. So I kind of grew up with that sort of mentality. And then my parents like encouraged it. My mom was like, my mom loved weed and just was like, every picture of her, she was like smoking.
There you go.
Oh, dude, she was the greatest. So like, yeah, forever, my whole entire life. Like she smelled like weed all the time. Like when you're a little kid and you don't know any different. And then as you get older and you're like, wait a minute. Like,
no, mine are getting like, I won't say judgy, but they're like roll in and I'm like, yo, I'm trying to fucking smoke some weed here. Like,
yeah.
My mom vaping,
like weed. Yeah. It's like, and I mean, even nowadays, like with vapes, like it doesn't smell, but my mom like always smelled like weed. Every car she had, everything. So like I grew up in that environment. So having that kind of like attitude and mentality when I was in Oakdale and I opened the dispensary, it was just it was a game of litigation, like some of the same shit that you're doing. It was just like, and that's why I think I like your stuff, because I'm like, oh, it's the same thing. I'm like, these dudes aren't that smart. So if they're not that smart and they're doing it incorrectly, let's go. Like, okay, let's fucking do it. Like, and then you learn yourself, okay, well, they can use these slick things like summary of judgment and all this different shit where they bring in a new fucking judge, and that's the judge who squashes shit like this, and they know how to do it. And like, you're not going to win, but you can learn how to do the dance. And when you learn how to do the dance and play the game, then you figure out what's really important. And then when you take that energy and put it towards what's important, you murk the fuck out of everyone else around you. It's like a superpower. So it's like,
I like that, man. That's some fucking game right there.
That's just true.
For sure. And honestly, like, they have all the power, but they're generally incompetent. They aren't that smart. So if you can maneuver, and look, you can never like win because it's an infinite game and they have an infinite amount of power, but you could definitely carve out little niches here and there where you could, little money pumps, make
it's like trapping raccoons.
Exactly.
Like
I've never trapped raccoons, but I like the metaphor. So I want to talk. I'm interested in this house grow stuff. So you're getting mortgages. Just like what?
They were getting mortgages.
Yeah, it was just like with the easy, the 04, 05, 06.
Yeah, so it'd be like a brand new house. I'd go in there. I'd rip out all the carpets. Then I'd take out the ceiling in the closet, go to the closet, rip the ceiling out, and then go and build up inside there a cold room up there with an AC inside of that. And then I'd use the ACs outside, but wouldn't run the AC system at the house so heavy, but it's really hot out there. So I just build like a box up inside of the attic space and build it, and then put ACs into that, like the splits, and then run that room super cold and pump that air down into the rooms.
And then how many lights could you get up in your typical 4-bedroom?
It really sucked. It was more like, I'd get like, if I was lucky, I'd get like 8 in a room. So you'd do like 24 in a house. and then you'd have like a 4-bedroom, and they'd be like sleeping in one
Prices
bedroom.
are different though, so you could like, you know.
Yeah, we get like I get like 5-bedroom places.
Right.
You know, those are like the dopest ones to get, and it was really easy to get them because like.
And then you had no problem getting tenants. They were like, whatever.
No.
If I ain't paying rent, I'm fucking.
They'd come in. Like I said, it was mostly like a homie or someone, or even like we were just like flying homies in from the East Coast and being like, you're good to do it. And like, you know, it got to the point where it was like, okay, you know, you learn quickly in business, like whether or not something's sustainable. And when you're fucking crazy, like things seem a little more sustainable. But then as you scale,
you're diversifying the risk though too. So if you got, you know, 20 house grows, then it's like, and they're all in different names. Like I'm sure as fuck don't think they're going back to the lender to figure out.
Well, we never had problems there.
Yeah.
I got raided because I had a dispensary. So I never got raided and had any problems because of anything. Yeah, it was because I finally was like, you know what, these, it was really the same thing we talked about. I was just like, these like legal dudes, like the dudes on the city council are stupid. These dudes are stupid. I'm like, and they're not just stupid, like they're lazy and they're kind of dumb. I was just like, fucking really? Like, you know, it's almost like the curtain was pulled back and I saw how complacent and lazy and just like how little energy and effort was going into like what it really takes to do that job. Like,
well, that's kind of my like analysis on the black market, which is like, if they think this overtax and regulate system is going to work, the black market is so much smarter than they are.
Oh my God.
It's like
it regulates itself.
Yeah. They're not, unless they change the taxation system, like the black market's always going to exist because this idea that they could enforce, A, it's not what we are trying to do. And B, they're just, I mean, black market guys are just clever, smart, fucking relentless, ambitious, know their way out of, Houdini shit. And the government is just a big clunky, ineffective pile of shit that doesn't have the same motivation. And they're generally spending taxpayer money. So they don't like, there's something happened today, I'll save it for later, but it involves taxpayer money. And we're like, well, I guess they are just, they're good with it, right? Because it's taxpayer money.
Yeah. I mean, there's no accountability. Then there's no measure in place to even, there's no scene of the crime.
Yeah, I always say like most, not the system manager did a great job of Catalyst, not putting it down, but most of these people that are running the government, they would get fired if they were an assistant manager. Like they couldn't do, and I'm talking like, shit, man, we might have, I don't want to get into presidential politics, but there might be people running for president that couldn't, hold a job, on the, whatever, at a store.
Well, I think because it's so crooked, there's no real understanding of like what you're doing. Like when you watch the Rogan podcast and you talked, and Rogan had great questions for Trump where he was like, what was like the first day? Like, what did you do? And it was, Trump was like, oh, fucking no. So you got to kind of like learn what's going on. And when you then, as an American, learn that like, wait, at the highest level, there's not like a fucking handbook or something. There's not like, it's like, hey, welcome to democracy, my friend. Like, there's nothing there.
I think somewhere like inside me, I knew that like the whole thing was kind of like a sham or whatever. But like as I've bumped into it enough on the local and the state level, particularly the local, but also the state, we're not big enough to really bump into the Fed in a real way, like not directly. But you realize like, oh, this shit's just a business. They're just trying to figure out how to get as much money out of here as they possibly can. And then once you understand it in those terms, some of the stuff makes a lot more sense, but they're not even really good at that or efficient at that, right? And so everything they do wastes 5 or 10 times more. But to your point, there's no accountability because at the end of the day, they have the taxpayer to.
Well, large scale politics is just businesses, like whatever company pays the most money to get what they want out of the puppet politician that's positioned between them and how they want the laws to be written so that their company can make the most money for their shareholders.
You think it's not that $1 billion that was raised, basically by both sides that's not just like given because they believe in everything that person's doing? You think they expect an ROI on that?
No, I mean, people need to study like there's too many people who are protesting. There's too many people who are in college nowadays that are protesting at all these different protests that can't tell you what a neocon is. And that's like a dangerous fucking thing. Like if you can't tell me if you don't know what a neocon is, like a person who all of their investments are essentially slated towards making sure that wars happen. And if you don't know what party at what time is the neocon party, because it'll switch. Like I've seen that in my life where it was like, oh, these, when I was younger, it was like Republicans are bad, man. And now I'm like older and it's like, Republicans are like Cam Hanes and shit, man. Like they hunt and they fucking, it's just a different thing now. I'm not going to get too big into it, but I will say this. I do think
the continuous wars is a uniparty
That's
thing.
a bad thing, man.
And it's super bad. And
bad.
the justifications never make sense to me.
I mean, because it equals blown up children, and then there's manipulation into like, you know,
and
like
all you got to do is
like,
all you got to do
yeah,
is follow the money. And if you could follow you could follow it all the way.
Well, just study, like, know what BlackRock is, know what they do. They're the guys that get the contract to then take it from a destabilized place to a stabilized place with mini malls and fucking apartments and hotels, and they get a big slice of the land for doing it and blah, blah, blah. Like, just understand what politics are and how the fuck it works. And, you know, you're chopping up lines of land and who owns them and what happens. Like,
no,
just
I definitely
know
agree with
shit,
that. I think
you know?
that there's, you know, and whatever side you fell on, like, I'm cool with it. I think 80% of us,
whatever.
I think 80% of us want the same thing. But I do think that at least before you make your decision, you should look a little bit behind the method acting that's really going on, right? Most of politics, you know, it's local, state, whatever, you know, the Fed too, and probably even worse, right? I just don't know it as well. Like, these motherfuckers are method acting. And a lot of them, you know, when I was a little more friendly, I still have some political friends, but like, then they go on a whole thing about whatever, and then they're off camera, and you're like, oh, or like not like on, like being a politician, and they're actually not like that at all, right? Like, and that to me is always like, it's weird. So, you know, I'd like to see people dig a little deeper, no matter what decision you ultimately come to, and like, why are we doing this stuff? And you could get into anything. You know, we were talking about this, you know, because I started eating this meat only. Just honestly, I didn't do it because like I just was in fucking pain. And you know, the FDA, whatever, not the FDA, the pharmaceutical, everybody wants to give you drugs, and I was like, nah, I don't really want to take drugs, and I had to take a drug to counteract it. Then I was gonna be on this drug for my whole life, so I just started eating grass-fed beef. I'm not perfect, but I'm kind of on that trip, and like all the pain in my stomach went away. But you know, nobody's been trained to prescribe nutrition, right?
No,
nobody's really looking at like,
well, how profitable is that?
No, exactly. I've never gone to a doctor, and I don't know why it took me like literally till a few months ago to have the realization. I've never gone to a doctor and had the doctor ask, oh, what are you eating? It's always like, you know, what test could I run on you? What could I do? And that, to me, that's another huge...
Well, never mind. He's standing in a building that serves food that's fucking horrible.
Yeah, that's weird. I never thought about it.
Like,
why is hospital food so shitty?
It's because it's institutionalized bullshit. You know, it's a
business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a business.
Yeah.
Hospitals are fucking crazy when it comes to that shit. Like, it's a business. You would think that the hospital would be like, hey, let's set a standard for this and that. That's not profitable.
They have to have the beds full, right? Because that's how they make money.
Business,
so like, if you're running a hotel, right, and everybody, like, it's kind of a funny comparison, but if you're running a hotel, or for that matter, you have an apartment, like, how do you make your money? You're keeping track of what the occupancy is. Mm-hmm. So the hospital is incentivized to keep people into the healthcare system. Good nutrition and all this other stuff gets people out of the procedure.
Well, there's two monsters working together.
Yeah.
There's the healthcare system, and then there's the pharmaceutical industry. And when those two they're so big, and they're two monsters that kind of fit together, because one of them is the solution, or the so-called solution that's sold to the customer. You know, it's you know, like, it's interesting to see that until or forever, no one's ever talked about like how pharmaceutical companies can.
Well, they're about to.
That's what I mean. That's what I was about to say. You know, I'm trying to not bring it to politics all the time.
It's fine. We'll talk about it. I mean, look, I'm happy to say that, you know, and again, you can get into all the individual views or whatever, but the fact that Robert Kennedy has brought to the forefront this issue of how food works, what's in our food. I mean, I don't think it's easy for anybody to argue that that's a bad thing, and that
crazy,
and that they're smearing the guy. And then in addition to that, you know, the almost every, not, you know, whatever, a majority or whatever it is, are food related, you know, diabetes, you go on and on, right?
Shit,
yeah, it's all based on nutrition. So to me, like, and this was just kind of the intuition I had on it, I was like, bro, I don't really want to be on these drugs. And I never go to the fucking doctor, but it was 4 years having little stomach issues. Just switching my diet, like, it's pretty much, I'm fucking cured. The alternative, if I wasn't a little more strong-willed, and I was like, whatever, I could always take these drugs they're going to give me. Like, I'm a little fucked up. But, you know, I gave it a go. I was like, hey, let's just give it a go, see what happens. And, you know, if it doesn't work, I go back to taking these drugs. So I ended up not taking the drugs. But think about how many people take them. And then if I take those drugs.
You keep doing what you're doing. And you take those drugs.
Yeah.
It's just, it doesn't go away. And it's like, and then the
or
funny thing is
those drugs too, right?
Well, the answer is eggs, cheese, bacon, meat. Like that's what the fucking answer really is like whole ingredients that are, not tainted in any way. And even if they are a little tainted, they're still better than these processed foods. But that's the answer. Like, oh wait, I can have tasty eggs and all these different things. And that's what kind of sold me on most of it was like, and that's what I eat is like cheese, eggs, meat.
Well, then people have said to me like, "Oh, your cholesterol," or like,
"Cholesterol's bullshit."
And I'm like, "Look, honestly, I don't know. I'm not getting tested, but I just go off how I feel. Maybe that's not the right way, but I'm fucking feeling better." And then like, what do you like this food pyramid? Like, the more I read up on it, and the way I actually got there was kind of interesting because I was getting down this, making sure our shelves clean and pushing the cap forward, trying to clean up the product, and started talking to the lab guys, and we kind of went down just a side conversation on food because he's really. Alec from SC Labs really passionate about the food, and he told a story about leaky gut, and I was like, "Fuck, bro!"
Like, that's a whole other world.
Well, that's what I kind of had, right? And then I was like, "Bro, you're telling my fucking story." He went through the whole thing, and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna try this, right?" And it was just through the accidental conversation of talking about, pesticides that were potentially and are in cannabis, and how we're gonna rectify that. And he started talking about food.
Glycophosphates and on all that grains and all that shit.
It's crazy. And then,
well, think of it this way: if every cell in your body regenerates every 7 years, that's true because you're producing mitochondria. The mitochondria in your body then reproduces cells. The cells that you see are the skin that grows and dissipates away and gets shaved away, and every organ in your body is regenerating. And so every 7 years, you literally regenerate your whole body. And the way you do it is in your gut, you produce all the mitochondria. That mitochondria goes into the rest of your body through your bloodstream and through everything else, and it makes all these cells. And like that's how your body actually works. Like it's a cool system, but in your gut's connected to your brain, and you have to correct your gut and make it so that your gut's clean and it's not all fucked up, and you're not consuming all this trash that your body can't do anything with. So you have to look at the micro macros of like what you're eating and understand more about like protein levels, fat levels, carbohydrates, different things, and know it all in that way. Just like as a grower, you'd know like, there's a lot of growers that I talk to that don't know that pH stands for potential hydrogen, and they can't tell me what NPK stands for, and they don't know what the fuck NPK is. And like, but knowing all those things and what they really mean, and like a plant can't take up nutrients unless the potential hydrogen level is correct. But the nutrient has to be within a certain range of its levels and correct so that the plant can take it. And okay, that's how you feed plants. Oh, cool. And the plant has to be dry and the roots have to be ready for the water. And it's a process. It's the same thing in the body where like
I do think there's a big parallel between taking good care of a plant and taking good care of your,
I mean, I've never seen great weed get grown in a dirty house.
Yeah, no.
Ever. And I've been to a lot of grow houses, and you could tell right away. Like when you get out of if they're smart and you can only use the garage and you jump out of the car and everything's fucking straight, you're like, this is going to be a cool grow house.
Yeah, not to get too political, but I hear RFK dropped a fuck you and me email to the FDA.
Good. Yeah, I saw that. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah,
he was like, beware.
Yeah,
it was like this wild. It was like I heard like a stick dragging on the concrete.
Well, you got to this guy. The interesting thing about him to me, like he's a traditional Democrat. Mm-hmm. He's been an environmentalist. He's championed all these causes.
He's a little wild.
Yeah, he's a little wild. As a litigator. Right. Speaking of being able to try and resolve things judicially, so he's been up against these guys. And he's aware of how corrupt they are and everything that they do. And now all of a sudden, he's punching basically up as a litigator. Now all of a sudden he's going to get to sit on top of them. I mean, it's going to be a fascinating.
He knows where all the bodies are too.
Yeah.
Because he's been poking around, so now I think he can come in, and that's going to. I think this is going to be like one of Trump's biggest things. It's. Trump is he's kind of like a David Copperfield kind of a guy. Like he did some shit that at first, and I don't know if it's because I got older. Maybe I'm wrong, but like he did some things that at first I was like, oh, this is fucked up. Like the Roe versus Wade thing. I was like, he's son of a bitch. Like I got a daughter, and I had all these feelings. And then I was like, well, I'm actually, I can have an opinion on this, but I'm not a woman, so I can't be like. From my uterus, like I can't do that. So I have to have just my leveled opinion that I can have. And when I have that opinion, I'm like, well, I think people should have a choice. And when you get into like what actually happened is they made it where the state that you live in dictates really what your choice is going to be. And that should be a lot of things that you do should be dictated on what state you live in. You should live in a state where you agree with a bunch of things because you're going to be happier in that damn state. And you're not going to move to a state where it's really cold if you hate the fucking cold because you're going to be miserable. So you probably want to. So it just falls in line with like logic of like how you would make a decision. And I was like, okay, I could see that. Like, okay. And then now let's look at math. Like, there's more abortions now than there was then, before they changed Roe versus Wade. There's actually more abortions now than there was then.
Oh, you mean since the conservative justices?
Yeah. Now there's more access. And by number, there's more, which means what happened was they went to letting states decide. And essentially some states were like, we're going to give a lot of access. And some states were like, oh, we're not going to, we're not going to give that access. And we're going to make it really, and then, but what happens then? Then you get to see that the person who's running your state's a little fucking crazy. And then you get to vote that guy out of there and get somebody else in there that's better. And like, it's a process, and it's not perfect, but if you do vote, like we just saw, shit changes. And like, I love how the thing that we just saw just now, I think, was like the death of fucking media. Because
I will say this:
how ridiculous.
I do think there's and look, I'm not touching the abortion
because he
one.
didn't just win that election.
I think it's a super personal, and like it's one of those issues where whatever side you're on, if you're very strongly opinionated on it, ain't nothing gonna change your mind, right?
Yeah.
And look, I do think what's been really.
But is it about sides or is it about just like straight logic? Because logic is like standing. Logic's like standing in front of a blackboard with a piece of a piece of fucking chalk, and saying we're gonna work this out here, in conversation, as to what's true and what's not on this blackboard. That's logic. That's like, okay, fucking do, and then everyone can see, and you're like, well, no, Dave, you made a fucking problem. It's a 6.
Yeah,
not
but
an 8.
I think there's a lot of ideology and religion in there, and just like personal belief systems that you're built with, and why it can't easily be resolved. Because if you take it as and again, I'm not going to fall down on one side or the other, but if you take it as a human life, then that's it, right?
Oh yeah.
And then that's why you get these extremes that are rape, incest, and
Oh,
whatever.
that's all. Yeah.
Yeah, and then but if you believe in choice, and you believe that you are to have autonomy over your body,
I believe in choice. Yeah.
Then at the end of the day, like, there is nothing that should interrupt that isn't fully been birthed yet. And I just think that unwinding that is like that's a debate that I don't think will
I
ever be
believe in
resolved.
logic, and I think like I believe in choice, and it's the same thing. Like, now you have a choice to live in a place that's in line with what you believe, and it's
I
how
think
it
on
should
like
be,
the
I
health
think.
issues, the economic issues, you could game those out a little more. I think abortion is such a personal, like, deeply held belief. It's almost like if you ask someone, do they believe in God, right? Like, it's such a deeply held personal belief. And I think a lot of abortion probably has to, like, the idea of conception. There is maybe some logic you could get applied to it. And I can't believe I'm talking about abortion. This is no. There's no win here, right? I'm just kind of
There is. It's. I mean, like, we're two guys. How much can we actually say about abortion?
I think there's something to
like,
that.
how much of a decision do we really have to make? Right. Like, that's and we could both have daughters or not. But I think it's like, I believe in like giving the woman has a right to decide. She ultimately does. She always should. That makes sense to me. And if there's assets or tools in place for that person to be able to make that decision, that's good with me. That's fine. That's all that I'm really asking for, is to give a person the opportunity to make the decision and not be forced or not be tricky lawed. Like Florida likes to do little tricky law things that make it, we're like, it's like, that's a little manipulative. I think you should give people the right.
It's like, you're not going to know, right?
Yeah,
just say what it is.
Say that you're doing what you're doing. Yeah, you're trying to like, right. And just say what you're doing.
Well, here's like a less controversial but interesting, and I think this has been an outcome of the election, and that I think that no matter where you fell on it, you would agree with this. I think legacy media is like fucked.
Oh, they're fucked. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they're,
especially if they go after pharmaceutical, because that's $16 billion. Or
well, that's the only thing keeping them in business, right?
And
live sports, and a little bit of the news, and I think generationally, we're probably both Gen X. I'm assuming what are you, 40s to 46? I think we're close.
51.
51, yeah, Gen X, yeah, here and there. I figure close to the same. So I think we've like expose ourselves to the podcast world, which we're in, right? I watch a lot of podcasts. I watch a little legacy media too, just to see what's going on. Whatever. I watch all of it. Both sides in quotes, just to be gamed up on what everybody's thinking. And generally, I'm pretty open-minded to like, okay, you got two people running. Who's the best? Like, I'm not going to go RD, but I do think this cycle, you saw, the legacy media doing what the legacy media does, and this alternative podcast universe.
Oh yeah,
it's
with
a different
way more followers.
It's
way more exposure.
It's a different game, right? And then you sit down with somebody for 3 hours. You're not segmenting it.
Yeah.
Even the debates now, they've turned them into like I don't even know, like 1 minute little, like, think about a Lincoln Douglas debate. Like, I would love why don't we do that anymore? I would love in the modern era to just let two guys go. The moderators basically
the two-party system prevents you from doing that now. That's what it is. Because the way that they even made it so that RFK couldn't debate. You have to have X amount of the what is it? I'm not positive of how it works.
Like 10, but I think is Americans, we should, like, and I guess you get that's part of your decision making process. You get a vote. You can't say you have to debate.
Yeah.
But I do think that if people refuse to debate, and look, Trump refused to debate the Republican primary because his calculation is he was way ahead. Biden made a similar, calculation. But I do think that presidential candidates, like, a 3-hour conversation shouldn't be that hard. I think a 3-hour debate, for 3 people should be required, and the moderator should just sit back and just move it a little bit.
We should use the people that we trust the most. So it should be like, all right, let's have both candidates go on Joe Rogan for 3 hours together.
But a lot of people would say, and I don't feel this way, but a lot of people would say Joe Rogan is, the interesting part about Joe Rogan, in so much is like, he went from Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump in whatever that was that 8 years, right? That's an interesting.
But he went from being worth 300 million or 30 million to, 400 million.
Well, yeah, he's got fucking 30.
And he moved from California to Texas, not because he was like, hey, Texas is nice. He was like, you're not going to tax the shit out of this fucking goose egg of, I think the first one he got was 100 million, then he got like another 200 the second one.
I mean, dude, I actually think.
But I think he was doing 30 million a year. I
think it's 25, 30 million viewers, more or less, something like that, some crazy amount. And these are 3-hour, these are 3-hour fucking shows. Like, I mean, it's like keeping it interesting for 3 hours is, and then look,
knowledge sells, man. Like when people are talking about shit and it actually flows. Like I think most of us now, our attention spans and how we're designed as humans to take things in. I can't do something without something else going on, and I don't know if that because I grew up like with the TV on in the background or something, and I just kind of like can concentrate better that way. But I always have to have something to consume. And it's like I consume all these podcasts and all these audiobooks and all this different shit. And there's like, and it's really a priority in my life where I'm like, fuck, so I'm like curating stuff and something new comes, oh fuck, or like a new Jack Carr book or something weird, and I know it's gonna be this many hours of something that I can have to kind of.
No, I really like it. I feel like you get to know somebody a little better too than like. And if you're just hitting a segment and then you got to go to commercial break, then you got to rush in another segment, or the debates, they get 1 or 2 minutes. Those are all prepped answers. Like, you sit a dude down.
It's just it's deception.
Yeah. No, it's just who could hit the talking point and get the one-liner.
You could tell who a person is by, I think, that long form conversation.
And you get somebody on a couple 3 hours, especially if it's a
diverse.
Well,
if you want more.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You're like, oh yeah,
you'll know right away.
Right.
It's like it's like the blind date when the lady talks.
And then each one vibes out a little different. Like Joe Rogan kind of does his thing. Then you got like whatever Theo Vaughn. You got PBD. Each one's a little bit different vibe. Where you're gonna go somewhere a little different, right, with it. And I just think it's interesting to get. And then you're not always getting interrupted.
There's different versions too. I like if you listen to what's this, Bill Burr. Yeah. Because it's just him talking.
I don't watch his podcast, but I think he's fucking hilarious.
Well, it's just him speaking by himself a lot of the time, which I think, like, if you're going to do a podcast, I think you should learn how to do it by yourself first and just talk and then kind of play that back and see how it is and be like, all right, is this interesting or not? Get good at that, being able to just cover topics and even select topics that people are going to want to hear about and being able to have the correct fucking cadence.
See what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. No, we've been talking internally, not to cut you. I want to get it so I could, one of these days we're going to do it where I could cover a topic, whatever it is, right? And then have the video and we were talking a little bit about the excise tax. I brought it up. Yeah. Just have 3 or 4 screens you can bring up, point, do the thing. Yep. Like they do, right? And then
good organization.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like
whatever, do it 15, 20 minutes, whatever, do a little topic. And
you could do like a dry erase board.
Right.
It's like, it's easy. Like, yeah.
It works,
it's just like capturing thoughts that lead to, the ideas that you can give an opinion on, that people are going to be interested in. And it's like, develop that stuff in the shower. You can develop that stuff, when you're walking the dog. You can develop that stuff at different times, take notes, and then put it together. But like, what are you doing? Like you're being creative and building shit and making stuff happen. And some people have that attitude, and they're optimistic enough to think that those ideas are going to make something rad, and then they take the chance of creating that fucking thing and putting it out there, and it is fucking rad. But then it's like, oh, you got to manage all that, and then you have to have the personality to manage that and actually make it, and because then it's wasted if you don't. And it's like, that's what you see when it's like, oh, look at this fucking amazing thing that I see here. If someone creates something cool, but it just starts with like an idea. It starts with a little bit of energy, and it's like that energy is what I think I'm addicted to. That is like, I have a really good friend that's one of my business partners, and we were talking one day, and I was like fucking going crazy, and I used to be a lot crazier. Like my energy, I didn't have so much like control of my energy technically, or at all. And he was like, man, you should try these meditations. And I was like, what the fuck you talking? I'm like, dude, what do you, like, I can't fish, I can't golf, I can't do any of that shit because I know that it's a waste of time. I just can't do any of that shit. So then he was just like, bro, like, just try this. And he sent me, the guy's name is Joe Dispenza, and he's this like really heavy guy on meditation, but from like a neuro, standpoint, from like, having these massive meditation retreats and then bringing in just as many people that are in the retreat room that are meditating, that are hooked up to these systems. There's a whole other convention going on with like scientists that are looking at the data that's coming in from these meditations. And so they're doing real shit to figure out like, hey, what the fuck is meditation? And like, what is the field? And like, does the pineal gland heat up when someone meditates and allow them to tap into the field? And is there an energy there? And how do you detect that energy? And so he turns me on to this dude, and I start doing the meditations. And that was kind of like the final thing that I think I needed in my life. That was like,
when did you start doing this?
Like 2 years ago.
Interesting. I got to
And
check
it
some.
fucking, bro, it was, like, it really made it where like.
I tried a little bit, because when I got sober, it's like kind of part of the program.
Yeah.
And I don't know,
It's crazy shit because it's transcendental meditation. So it's like 24 minutes in the morning, 24 minutes at night. And that's technically. God,
I'd be dying. Like, God bless. Like, maybe one day I'll be able to. I never rule it out. Like, just because I tried it once and couldn't do it. As you get older, like, you change a lot. And then, like, the person you were even 4 or 5 years ago is a lot different, right?
Oh,
but it's still
so
the same.
different,
The same you kind of carries through.
It took me a long, long time. Like, I converted to Buddhism probably, I'd say like 18 years ago or 17 years ago. Maybe like 15 or 16 years ago, I think. Couldn't meditate for shit and was like, what the fuck? But knew that like I didn't want to be, Catholic again. I was like first communion, confirmation. I grew up this way. Like I was studying some stuff and was like, I think this is a better idea, and sort of changed my life. Couldn't meditate for shit and didn't, was like, no, tried it, worked with a Buddhist monk, did meditation that way. I was like, no, like, was just like, yeah, not for me. It's like, I can't sit cross-legged and I can't do this. I just was like, that's it. And then this came along. And I don't know if it was because it came from like a person that's a good friend of mine that I know that person, and I can look at them and be like, this dude is at peace. Like, I know this motherfucker's at peace. I was like, all right, I'll try it. And it made sense. It was just, some things like they make sense to you. So
you give it 24 minutes. Like, what do you, during that time, like what?
24 minutes. Yeah. It's just, it's a guided meditation, and it has like you put the headphones on, and you get the trick is to get like the Apple over the ear ones, because that really covers your ears and it gives you like a good coverage and sound. Probably fries your brain with 5G, but you're going to die anyway. And you put that on, and then it gives you like perfect sound, because what you're listening to are ohms and other frequencies that they're using in the meditation to help help your brain go into like a different phase of what your brain's in, because your brain can relax through breath. Your brain can relax through like, so if you close your eyes and breathe and get control of your diaphragm and sit there in any setting, like there's people that can do it. You can learn how to do it. It's called walking meditation. So it goes from like meditation, which is like closing your eyes, envisioning things in your head. And as you envision them, you then feel them. And then you convince yourself that you're seeing this, and you get good at creating the view of what you want to see and make that movie in your head, and then how you feel in that situation. And in these meditations, that's what you're doing through that time, and it's guided and they're talking. But after a long time of doing it, you really figure out like, oh, that's what the fuck I'm doing. Like, oh, they're doing that. Oh, I'm doing that. Because you learn after you learn that and you learn the game of it, essentially, like what the hell it really is, and it's like being very calm. It's having what I just said, like thinking something, creating it, bringing it to reality in your head and seeing it very clearly to the point where you feel it. And then in your breath, like inward and outward, like you could kind of like regulate emotion in your body as you're breathing. So you learn then, if I'm feeling it, now I'm going to regulate emotion through the way that I breathe to line up with that feeling. Then now I've fucking created in my head this whole fucking reality with emotion and every other thing. And then I just meditate and put that into the field. And it's like, boop. And you're in the meditation and it's asking, at some point in the meditation, it's like, what's that vision? Now it's kind of in the meditation, it's gotten to you in a point where now you're kind of thinking in your mind, your mantra or what you're thinking to like put into that process that you want to see. You do that process and it takes you through that. And it's like a 24-minute meditation. They trick you because what they're really teaching you how to do is like calm the fuck down and just like chill and be willing enough to suspend yourself into this ridiculous world of shutting your eyes and calming the fuck down and visioning this and doing this. And once you do, you're kind of like if you're smart enough, I think you're kind of like, oh, they just tamed the lion. Like they just made me fucking, and then it works. And you're like, oh, the breathing works and this works. Fuck, I actually am calmer. And you're like, so then there's more meditation and they're like, all right, now you can do this. Now they'll teach you about like the beckoning of the energy centers, which is essentially understanding the chakras in your body. And it sounds super crazy and weird, but like you start doing the meditations and you start doing the stuff and you're like, fuck, this totally works. You're like, this is cool. Like I actually, okay. And you do that, you get through the beckoning of the energy centers and then you go into walking meditations. Walking meditations is really like a way of just like looking at how you think. And, it teaches you like never talk negatively to yourself. So you just get rid of that. You don't ever fucking talk negatively. You give yourself more understanding than any other person because you're really going to fucking need it. So like you instill that and then that becomes a habit. And then you start to like hack away at all this other shit. So the walking meditation is like teaching you how to deal with shit in your head. And then you start to just think differently. And then you're at a point where like nothing fucking bothers you. And then everyone realizes that nothing bothers you. So then they don't want to fuck with you because they understand that like, that dude, nothing bothers that guy. He doesn't give a fuck. And it's like this magical thing that kind of happens in your life. And then if you, like I used to wake up every morning. My dad was a trucker. His brothers are like fucking salvage yard dudes and, auto body dudes and like real working dudes. And so I wake up every morning with a list in my head. What the fuck, as a dad and as all these things and what do I got to do and guilt and all this shit. And it's like, that's not the way to do it. If you're doing it correctly, you wake up and the first thing you think is like, God, I'm fucking stoked. Like I'm instantly, your first feeling is like, I have so many things to be grateful for. And your brain just starts rushing into the shit that you're grateful for. And I know that because that's how my life is now. And it used to be like, what do I got to fucking do? And I'd get a pad of paper and I'd write down all the fucking kooky ass shit that I had to, figure out, I got to fucking do it, and like put myself into this panic of thought that was just not good for anybody, like not really making anything productive. And then learned this process to kind of like do all these things. And then now I know it works because I wake up in the morning and first thing is like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, no,
this is nice. This is a nice room.
I think one of these days I'll be able to get it. I think my issue is, I love like waking up and, my little expression is like, man, I never had it so good. And that's always, that's the way you want to wake up.
Oh yeah.
And like at the end of the day, whatever we're going through, 99.99% of the time is problems that you make in your own mind.
People would
right?
kill for my problems.
Yeah, it's like whatever.
For real.
It's not even a thing, right?
I'm like, where's my favorite hash? It's like people would kill for
and it's real easy to get stuck in that material world. I think that it's in some sense you have to do it. I'm glad you started it. What was that? Would you say 2 years, 4 years?
2 years.
So
2
49. So I got a chance. We can do it.
But
what happens to me is all these the list of stuff then rushes in my head.
Yep.
And going out and trying to like exert your will.
Well, let me just say this. That's waking up and writing that list down is not a bad thing. That's like, so if you want, so I'm like you. When I first started doing the meditation, I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, there's nothing going on in here. It was
I'm open-minded though. Like, I've tried it
place.
a few times and I would try it again. Maybe it's just like where you got to get in life.
Yeah.
But I know enough people that I have a lot of respect for that are like, don't, this works. Just do it.
Well, everyone's different. So for me, I needed to sit down with a piece of paper first and get all that shit out of my head. and just write on the piece of paper, like, all right, what are a million fucking things that I think I got to do? And I'd go through it, business-wise, personal-wise, this, why, that. Once I had it on a piece of paper, then I put it aside, and then I know I got it. I don't need to worry about it. So now I can put it out of my head, and now I can just focus on meditation. And then I would sit there, focus on the breathing. That kind of gets your head in the right place. Listen to the guided meditation, the frequency and the ohms that the meditation's at or playing, and you're getting that, which is kind of like priming your brain.
So, but you have an audio thing going that kind of gets you into the...
Yeah. It's like, it's got some shit going on. There's like some other strings are being pulled, There's other like mystical things going on for sure.
Well, that's cool, man. That's really cool. No,
and it works though. And I think it like makes it, what it really does for you is makes it where less shit has the ability to make you lose your shit and get you super mad. And in fact, it kind of makes you laugh. Like, doesn't make everything go away. Like, I still fucking drive like a nut sometimes, and I still do all kinds of shit. But like, I know that I am, and I have a better understanding of it, and I can make a decision to do the right thing, and I'm in a better place when it comes to. Well,
I think sometimes too, just zooming out and laughing at yourself. I like even the election. I'm like, bro, okay, we're really just a speck of dust on a small galaxy in a tiny solar system, and
we're in space right now.
Yeah, and we're oh my god! And
this
I'm not
is
saying
space.
Not to downplay its importance, but like when you do that a little bit, you kind of realize like, wait a minute, all right, settle down. It's not. We're gonna be fine one way or the other, and if we're not, like, the universe is gonna be like, obviously we're all rooting for humanity and want to see America and humanity do good, but at the end of the day, like, we are arrogant in that sense that like, we are only one species on one planet.
Well, the question I always like to ask myself is like, does reality create, or does your consciousness create reality, or does your reality create consciousness? And that'll just spin your head, because it's like, I think your reality is your reality, and we're all connected. But like the movie that plays for you, that you're essentially directing, is your thing, and then mine is mine. And we're all in this different vessel.
No, they overlap. There is nothing.
Yeah, they do intersect.
Well, speaking of the legacy media, and then people that develop different opinions for different reasons, like, the perception is the reality, and that's what a lot of politics is.
Well, that's what deception is.
Yeah. So you're shaping people's perception either through persuasion or deception, and everybody does it, right? And at some point, I think there's this inert thing that we want to get at a truth, if there is an objective truth. But like, really, when you think about it, right, and I like this saying, is you can't do anything for a perceived slight, right? You could, if it's an actual slight, you could fix it because everybody knows what it is. But perceived slight, those things happen all the time, and you might not even realize you did it.
Yeah,
but somebody else might have just a different viewpoint,
perception of it,
a different perception, and then that ends up being real, right? So, it's all this, the consciousness and the reality and the perception it's super interesting on the macro, but then when you get down to like, persuasion, leadership, politics, you see how it like actually plays out in whatever you want to call it, the more material world that we hold on to make sure that we're fucking, basically saying.
Well, it's like I heard this guy say, he was like, yeah, you never hear a poor person say that this is a fucking, some people are like, oh, this is just a simulation. Like, you never hear a poor person be like, this is just a simulation. It's always like some rich fucking super wealthy dude. He's like, life is just a simulation.
Elon's on simulation.
Like, simulation my ass, motherfucker. Like, it's a simulation.
I'm trying to pay my fucking bills over here.
Yeah, you got $137 billion. I'm sure that feels like a simulation of sorts.
137? Is that what he's...
I think that's what he's got.
All right, well, hey, I don't want to keep you too long. I want to ask you one more that was interesting when you started, then we'll circle it up. A really good conversation, and why I don't like to talk too much off camera, because like, we didn't fucking know we were gonna go here. We knew we'd talk a little bit about the event. For sure. Super interesting, because the meditation thing is actually something I haven't picked it up lately, but that I've tried to do, and that I think at one point I'm open-minded enough too to realize like, hey, I haven't conquered it yet. Going back to the event stuff, and I heard you bring up the High Times thing. And just events in general, right? So obviously there's a big vacuum where High Times is now essentially for the short, at least the short term, the foreseeable future, exited the space. Hopefully whoever gets it could revive the brand, because I do think it was, you grew up when I did. If you didn't have a magazine on your table that was High Times, where your bong was sitting on,
you're
like,
nobody.
You're nobody. Like, what the fuck?
Sucker.
And I try to tell the youngsters in the office, like, bro, like, the idea of somebody photographing weed, yes, it was on paper, and yes, there was things called magazines. It was a a wild thing.
It was like a butthole.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
just didn't see it.
Yeah,
you know,
didn't
you
see
were
it.
like, you didn't see buttholes now.
It's
Like
fucking
now,
crazy. Yeah,
buttholes are everywhere now.
Yeah,
Like it's
crazy.
different.
It's crazy.
It was crazy.
So, and they're such a part of the culture, you know, as it came up, and for them to be out, and then, you know, I think events is its own thing. You know, what's your take on, like, I guess the vacuum they left in the event space, and then just, you know, where you see events going in general, and then, you know, you kind of have these, and we don't really run either like legal, in quotes, legal events because they're too fucking hard.
Yeah.
And so we just, you know, whatever, they're just private events, and if you want to come and smoke weed, you can come and smoke weed.
We live in the land of the free, which
Yeah.
is wonderful.
So, I mean, how do you see, I mean, look, I guess I asked you two questions. One, you know, what do you think about the whole High Times kind of folding up and just being out of the event space altogether?
Oh man, I mean the High Times thing's an interesting question. It's a kind of an interesting space to even, you know, I have a lot of respect for Marcus and, you know, Danny and Bobby and all those cats, and like I feel like those guys really gave me, you know, an opportunity. Like once I, you know, to go back to what we were talking about before, my trajectory in this business was I had those grow houses. I then opened a dispensary. The dispensary got raided. I then sued Stanislaus County. I won the criminal case. They dismissed the criminal case based on law enforcement negligence. I already had a civil suit against them. That just rolled right into it. I won my civil case. And then at the same time, in that process, I was working with Rob Raich, who's my attorney. He had introduced me to a grower. We started this thing. We were working for the Medical Cannabis Association, and we just came up with an idea. We were like, why don't we just, you know, why don't we just get our own gas chromatograph mass spectrometer? Why don't we find some chemists? Why don't we develop our own methodology for potency testing? And why don't we just test cannabis ourselves? And the real idea came from it because we were both feeling so froggy and mavericky that we were like, there's no better way to tell George Bush to fuck himself. Like, we've both owned dispensaries and grows. This is like the next level. This is like going over his head and being like, we're going to test cannabis. Because at the time, if you tested cannabis, there was a law where the DEA would take away your license for testing, and they would charge you $10,000 per sample that they find in your lab. But that was only, they could only do that if you were going for a DEA license. If you didn't have a DEA license, they only found a gram of fucking cannabis or whatever your sample size was. So with that reality, we were sitting with a lawyer, and I was like, then it's not illegal. If we can have the cannabis, they don't have an application with my fucking name on it that says I want to be one of the chemists or one of the companies that's testing cannabis for the government. Fuck this. And we just like went around it, started the first cannabis testing lab. That was Steep Hill Labs. And I, as a partner and an owner of the company, I did all the marketing, sales, and promotions and built that, you know, the sales part of the company, like working with, you know, we work with Harborside first and Steve D'Angelo and his brother Andrew, and it was actually Steve D'Angelo and Dress. So a lot of people don't know that Dress is the other owner that started Harborside, not Andrew. But Dress is like a quiet guy. He's kind of a chill ass dude. But worked with those guys, launched that, had Steep Hill, and that's how I got into hash. Was owning a testing lab. What you learn is that gas chromatograph mass spectrometers or liquid chromatography machines, all analytical testing is separation and then quantification. So you separate everything and then you quantify what's there. And or you separate, quantify, and identify. You know, so if you're doing pesticide testing, you're separating, quantifying, identifying. If you're doing potency testing, you're separating everything that's in the sample. You're then quantifying it all by weighing the ions or doing different things that you can identify. And then you're being like, this is how much is there. That's testing. That's all of it, if you simplify it and really understand what it is. And in that process, as an owner of the company, we had access to different equipment. And one day I found out about this piece of machinery that was called a preptative HPLC machine. And a preptative HPLC, you could take a preptative HPLC, you could set it up, and then you could take your waste and you could run it through a preptative HPLC, and then every single compound that's in it comes out into isolated form. And I was like, I'm dabbing all this shit. I was like, this is fucking dope. So then I had access to like raw THC, which is like this red crystal, you know, that smells like Pine-All, like a crazy smell to it. Because what happens is when you make these isolates, these different flavonoids or different esters will bind with them. And then that's what it always is going to taste like, especially if it's an isolate. Like the perfect example is if you take CBD isolate and you dab it, it tastes like cherries. That's a flavonoid that's bound with it. Same thing with when you take raw THC. So anyway, I had access to all these things. So then I'm like, this is fucking crazy. Like, and then I'm like, well, if this is how extraction works, then like you could be the greatest hash maker in the world, because now all you have to really understand is how to separate stuff. There's catalyst method, there's different methods, you know, to like do separation. So I just geeked out and was like, all right, this is really what I want to do. And had Steep Hill was blowing up. It was doing well. We were in like 16 states or something, 14 states. Company was doing good. Got into an argument with my business partner and he fired me. So then I was like, fuck. So then I was like, all right, well, everything's hot right now. You have no control over me selling stock. I'm going to sell stock, you know, and I'm going to take some money and take some time off. I did that. And then Advanced Nutrients came to me after I took a year off, and then they came to me and they're like, we want to hire you as our head of business development for our company. And I'm like, well, I don't have a college degree. I don't have any of this shit. But it was really just from like social media posting and other shit that I was doing at the time. The new president of the company was like, this is who we need for business development, because they wanted to bring in somebody like Advanced Nutrients. A lot of the nutrient companies, the biggest mistake they make is thinking that they're a cannabis company. Like, you're not a cannabis company. You just sell to people who work in the cannabis industry. And as soon as you fuck that up, your business changes. So they realized that, and they were like, we need somebody who's like really well connected. And because we started the first cannabis testing lab in California, in Northern California to be specific, it was kind of like walking into a room. It's walking into a room of growers with a ruler that never existed, because now everyone can measure their dick. And that's what growers really wanted to do. They wanted to be able to, they could grow the same weed and stand across from each other and ask you what you thought of it and tell each other that theirs each sucks, and win a contest and they each won a contest, but whose is really fucking better? And as soon as you could test the potency of it, one guy could look at the other and go, what's up, bitch? I got, 2% more than you. And so it was like that process. I learned a lot. I learned, everyone in there, 30% THC, there's no fucking way. It's 30% THCA, which is THC acid, which could make total sense. But as soon as you strip away the carbon and you decarboxylate that THCA, there's no fucking way. The max THC that a flower can ever have, based on the biology of the plant and what it can produce, is about 22%. That's it. And then I can prove that by taking all the data from Steep Hill and all that it's ever had, which it's, the company sold for $36 million. I don't own the company anymore. I don't have anything to do with it. But I know that there was a lot of data, and I used to get to see that data. And when you looked at that data, there's not a single sample, anything that would, because you have a margin of error, but nothing peaked over 22%. It's all right there. The hottest, illest, dopest shit was always right there at that mark. So I learned a lot of stuff and like got to understand a lot of the inside and outside of business, and worked for Advanced. Then Big Mike was like, I want to do a cannabis company. So then we partnered up, myself, him, the president of the company, and then the CFO. All four of us kind of came together. I ran the company as the, I was the chief operations officer. So I helped run the cannabis company out of LA. We did that. And it just kind of turned into one of those things where, like, after a couple of years, there were some issues and with funding, and Big Mike didn't know where the money went. And I go, oh, hey, what's going on? And it was kind of like, and then I wake up and like the president gets fired, and I'm like, oh, this is like a Roman movie that I saw, I was like, fuck. And then next thing I know, I'm on like paid administrative leave, and then, obviously what comes after that. So it was, but I got paid a great severance. So one thing I'll say, like, I love Mike. He's not a bad fucking dude. He's actually a really good guy. Made a lot of money working with Mike, got paid really well, took very good care of me. And I got nothing against Mike. I think he's actually like a dude that wants to do a lot of good stuff and wants to be involved in a lot of stuff. And I think he falls victim to like having the wrong people around him sometimes. And you can see that, like, whether people are just like, he has so much money and he's doing so much that you get like, when you see those people that have so much money that they're like, you're like, who the fuck is this dude? Like, right. And I think that's what happened. That's kind of what's happened to him. So, shout out to Mike. He really like put me into a position where, like,
we're going to bring Big Mike into it. But
well, he put me in a position where I can understand what corporate business is.
Right. And
I'll be the first to say it, like, and they don't want you to know this, but executives don't do shit. They don't do a fucking thing. They don't do anything. It's if you ever run a company and you allow it to have that sort of corporate structure and you have executives, you are a fucking knucklehead. Like, you live in a 1-bedroom apartment and you shop at Costco. You don't make a lot of sense to me. Like, there's no real understanding of like how you should manage things correctly when it comes to like managing things. And Big Mike showed me showed me a lot of different things, and all that stuff. So I did that for years, and once that all kind of fell apart, got a great severance from Advance, and was able to kind of like sit back and be like, what do I want to do now? And then I started my own management consulting company, which is 800 Pounds Mantra. Started that company, started doing management. We managed Chiba Chews and their production in California. James, the owner of the company, is a good friend of mine, so we did that first. We worked with Sam at Show, and they were doing the production of the Chiba Chews and stuff. And then we worked with Grandiflora Genetics and helped Mark and Prada with like some of their stuff, like
you got
back
probably
office.
more. You got all sorts of little.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Did a bunch of the shit, and then just kind of like, then as all this was happening, I got super lucky because I was like, all right, man, like I could see the writing on the wall and kind of what was going on, and I was like, man, like the smartest motherfuckers in this game are like dudes that are grabbing data or having something that's like, so you have to be collecting something or creating something where you're gonna have a massive volume of value when you sell what you have. So you have to be accumulating that while you're building whatever you're building. So that was like an important thing to build pipeline. And so I looked at like how am I going to make money, So I had this management consulting company, I had a couple of guys working for me, had a lot of connections and contacts in the industry because again, like we invented the ruler to measure your dick with. So I knew every fucking edible company and every fucking grower and every fucking, all of it, and was presenting the Hash Award for High Times at all of the events, and like just got to know like all these people, and was really built like a strong Rolodex, and then really left testing and was honest, was like, look, 20% of all this shit's wrong because of human error, and they're not fucking telling you that, and was like just really like straightforward. And that's why I think I gravitated towards you, because I saw you doing a lot of the same shit, just like, I'm gonna tell the truth.
Try our best to call it how it is.
If you can't fucking handle it,
I'm not saying we're right.
If you can't handle it, I don't have a problem with it because I can stand behind the truth.
Right.
And like those are, and I think that's kind of what
I was doing. Like anybody who ever wanted to like disagree, I would have them sit right there,
have a
and
conversation,
I would debate for 3 hours, openly and respectful. So,
and if you're wrong, you're wrong.
And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Or you can move me, you can move me. It's fine. But we try our best to get it on the truth. Man, look, we could rock this all day.
Oh yeah, sure.
Let's try. Put your phone on. We'll close it out with a post. I think will work. We'll just like free roll it, and then we'll put it in there. But we're closing it up. Man, we could have gone 3 hours Joe Rogan style. I think we did like an hour 30. Yeah, you're rocking. Really cool shit. We covered a lot of cool shit, man. Check them out on IG. Addison, Turpova, talked about, man, the roots of the industry, the new events.
Everything but what we wanted to talk about.
Meditating, everything, man. We brought it all in.
Well, can I talk about the event a little bit?
Yeah, get it out there.
Yeah, so the event is January 17th, 18th, and 19th. It's a 3-day event. We do something completely different. It's a competition. The way we do our competition, only the hash makers are the judges, and we simplify it for the guests, and we make it where half of the entry that the judge puts in goes into the judge's kit, the other half goes to the open hash bar. And that's not a dab bar, that's an actual bar that we have open during the event, where we give out every hour, there's a drop, and we give out the hash that the makers enter. So you could try the entries, and they're in 1/4-gram jars. You take it, you build your stash. It's not this like barbaric, let me clean this rig and you could take a dab and walk away and not even know, or have a opportunity to try something later. Yeah. So we do that. That's the promotion for the brands, obviously. So whoever enters, they're getting promotion during the drops and during the event, so that they're able to get it. We don't have a VIP area. It's all open, so you'll see the makers sitting there. You can go up and give them flowers and talk with them, talk about their brands, talk about what they do, ask questions. So they're really on display there with everybody. We do a farm-to-table California cuisine, amazing catered meal, and that's kind of the difference too. It's like, I hate going to events and paying $5 for a Martinelli's apple juice that came from Costco and getting nickeled and dimed and kind of beat up a little bit. And it's like, I want to have events where like the food's really good. Like our whole thing is good food, good hash, good people. That's the environment that we create, and we work with the makers to promote their brands and introduce people to their brands. We work with big brands like Toro Glass and Mothership Glass and companies like that to like, they have these massive lounge areas where they sponsor our event and give people places to sit and kind of relax. The hash makers have booths. And it's, we're not, we don't really look at it as like a place where, we want like a bunch of tents that all looks like a trade show, so we make sure that like all the booths, we pay for the tents and make sure they all match. And then they bring their banner and they bring their tablecloth. And we kind of stole that from like Hall of Flowers, where it's like, no, let's like simplify it and not overboard too much and like let it be mild, because then we can pay for staging and have a theme and have the event be themed in a cool way. So we kind of do that. So it's 3 days. The first day is a really exclusive dinner. There's only 200 guests. That's really the 35 hash makers and their guests. That's 70 guests total. Then we have about 25 guests that we invite off of a list, and then there's about 100 tickets to that dinner. So the dinner is 200 people. That's the first night. We give the judges their judges kits that night, and then in order to give them more time to judge, and then in order to give our guests, our sponsors and the hash makers more time to have guests and people to work with, we add the Saturday in there as a sesh day. There's no catered food. We bring in food trucks. Everyone has access to the hash makers and everybody. They can ask, just figure everything out on that day. Vending, whatever, we don't police any of that, but, that's what happens in California, so it's great. And then on the Sunday, we bring back the catering company and do an insane brunch, prime rib brunch with the chef cutting the prime rib, and have a bakery that we work with in Los Angeles, and have a big coffee truck, and everything's all, paid for. So you kind of get to come in, have this amazing brunch, eat, sesh, hang out, and then we do the award ceremony. So the first night is the hash supper. The second day is sesh more. And then the last day is the wee woo brunch and award ceremony. So
I love it. Even the little extra details to make it a little bit more homey, bring it all
cool,
together.
Because you got 3 different customers.
We're rolling through. Check it out. We'll put up the details.
Tickets on the website.
IG. Yeah, on the website. What's the website?
It's hashmore.com. So you can go to hashmore.com.
Hashmore.com.
Yep.
Check it all out, man. This episode will be dropping in, I don't know, maybe a week, 10 days or so. And anyway, man, thanks for coming on. Super interesting conversation.
Appreciate it.
Like I said, we hit it all, man. Come check it out. Don't forget, event in January. Go to hashmore.com. We're going to finish this one off a little differently. Hash for the people.